Alright, the first thing you need to do when replacing your clutch is to soak the friction material in motorbike engine oil. This makes sure that it doesn't get spun up dry and lead to excessive wear and friction. I went for a complete clutch kit, Barnett carbon fiber kit. Usually with the OEM kit it's a cork type material, and with that you might need to soak the clutch overnight, but reading over the instructions from the manufacturer, this only needs to be soaked in for, they said, about 10 minutes. Um, even so, I've had this soaking in here for a couple hours, and I've kept rotating it around every hour or so to make sure that all the plate surface is covered evenly with oil, and the material has had some time to soak up the oil. So we'll go over to the bike now, get the clutch cover and everything off, and then we'll go to install the new clutch kit. So this kit also does come with the heavy duty springs, which you need for the carbon fiber. You might want to check the stock springs to make sure that they are within their set length, and you also have to remember that because of heat cycles that they might not be clamping down as hard as they were when they were new, so you might want to replace those springs if you really want to. Alright, so now we're back at the bike, and this is the clutch cover right here. As you can see, I put the bike on the side stand. This is so you can remove this cover without oil dribbling out, just in case if you don't want to change your oil or filter, but I highly recommend that you do, because usually a worn out clutch will emit particles all throughout your system. But this will allow me to easily get in there and change the clutch without oil coming out, and then I can do an oil and filter later. To get this clutch cover off, it's all 10mm bolts, and I usually arrange them out just to make sure that there are no odd sized bolts, but luckily for the Gen 2 Hayabusas and the B King, all these bolts have the same length, except one has a little clip on it that we will see shortly. When removing this housing, you would want to do it in a crisscross pattern. I've already gone ahead and loosened these bolts up, so we'll just get in there and just zip these off. I'm going to use an impact wrench to take them off, which doesn't hurt it at all, but when you go for reinstalling these bolts, you'd want to put them in with your hand, and then torque them down using a torque wrench. For this, it's actually quite easy with this type of clutch. All you'll need is realistically a 10mm, an 8mm with an impact or a wrench, which you can do with quite easily. Some sort of pick tool, a magnetic stick if you have one. I'm using an Allen key as a little trick you'll see later on, and obviously your torque wrench. So now I'm going to go around and undo these with my 8mm. So make sure you put this back in that same hole, because this has a little clip on it to hold a sensor wire in place. So now you should be able to pull this entire clutch housing out. We have all the bolts out. You should just come out like that. These two dowels help it locate in place. And when we go back to install this, I'll show you a trick that will let you take this clutch cover out without destroying this gasket. As you can see, it all came out in one piece. So when I go to reinstall this, I'll show you what I do to help this happen. Just put that over here. So this is your clutch basket over here with your friction plates and everything like that. This is held in with 10mm bolts. So I'll just quickly change this out. When undoing these, again, you want to go in a crisscross pattern and loosen them a little bit at a time. So that's all that it is. It's a spring, a washer, and a bolt. Now this outer hub should just pop off. You want to make sure that there is a washer behind here, so make sure to catch that if it loosens up on you. So I'm going to carefully pull this back, and there's your washer here. So just to make sure I don't drop it off anywhere else, I'm just going to remove it, put it back there. I'm going to put this to the side. You can inspect this. As you can see, there is some digging in over here, but this clutch has a hard life. I take this bike out drag racing a lot, which is why the clutch died on me. Yeah, so I'm just going to put this to the side. So this is your friction material over here, and between these friction materials are steel plates. So this is your drive plates. So this gets power from your motor over here, and these drive these steel plates. This is your driven plate. So this should be like a silver metallic color. It's gone all black, probably because I'm going quite hard on the clutch, but that's why we're here, to replace it. As you can see in the back, all this material is worn away, and I'm being quite aggressive on it. So when all this wears away, it's gonna, this is inside your engine, so all this material will get flung out in there. So when you go to do a clutch change, especially when it's worn down, you'd want to replace your oil and filter as well. Now we're going to go ahead and pull this stack out. I like to pile them up the same way that I pull them out of the stack. So you'll be able to get your fingers and then pull a whole bunch of them out. Just put them over to the side. And past this point you can't get your fingers in there, so that's why I like to use the pick tools and the magnetic pick tool. So we're just going to go through and take these out. So when it comes to these, you can just put your two pick tools on the side like that, pull them out. We're just going to go through and take out the steel and friction plates. So usually the last friction plate is the hardest to get out because it's right against the basket. So again, I'm just gonna try to go in from the side and see if I can get it to release. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get my Allen wrench. I'm gonna pick up one side and slide this behind it. So now at that point it's pulled back, and I know it won't go back towards the back plate. Then I can work on the other side and then pull it out like this. So that's your last plate. Now in the back are some steel rings. Just to make note of it, I'm going to pull these out. Your new kit may or may not come with this, so hang on to this. And they just go there within the last friction plate like that, and then you got to get the washer. I think this is to reduce the chatter and everything off the clutch pack, put a bit of preload on it. So that's your clutch pack over there. Now, once you have the entire clutch pack out, it's good practice to inspect these areas over here where these drive plates are sitting. Over time they can begin to notch into these indexes over here. I can feel a little bit of notching, but it's not too bad, so that's something you want to inspect. Same with these internal teeth over here, they can also notch into the basket as it's just soft aluminium. As you can see, maybe there is some polishing. You can see where the teeth of the driven plates have been sitting over time, but I can't really feel too much notching when I run it through with my finger. So if you're curious, this factory Suzuki system is supposed to be wobbly like this. This is just a mechanism that helps to disengage the clutch ever so slightly if you do aggressive downshifts, so it prevents the rear wheel from overdriving the motor and prevents rear wheel lockup. So how that happens is, maybe you can see that when this actuates, it pushes this piece out a bit, so when the rear wheel is overdriving the engine, this will slam back here and start to slide up and disengage the clutch pack a little bit. Now, while we have all the clutch plates out, it's good practice to go in with a rag and just clean the area out for clutch material, as it will be flying out all over the place. You want to clean it, yeah. So that's all clutch material that's spun around the basket. Most of it will collect in here, but some will go into the oil, so that's why you need to do an oil and filter change after you change the clutch pack. So I'll just go in here and clean everything out and get back when I'm ready to install the new clutches. Alright, now that everything's cleaned up, we're going to reassemble the clutch. The first thing that needs to go is your flat washer, which is right here. Gonna just clean that up a bit, put that down this way. And then your spring washer, you want to make sure that the dish is curving out, so you want the lower point in towards the basket and this higher point facing out towards your clutch plate. So put that in. Then we need to put in the friction plate, and this is a special friction ring that allows for the washers to sit within it. So this one goes in first. Then got the metal plate over here that goes within the teeth. Now it's just the regular friction plates that follow up, and there's 9 more of these, so it's just going to be alternating friction plate and metal plate. So I'm going to continue to do this until I get to the last friction plate. Clutch kit the next time around. Just looking at the overall build quality of this, I can tell that it's not as the same as the OEM kit. What I'm mainly talking about was the main metal plates I put at the start had these dimples on it, but these last 2-3 metal plates are just smooth discs. I don't know why they would do this, and when I read the instructions there was no note about this at all, so I think it was just mismatch, but unfortunately this is what I got. If they were all these smooth discs without the dimples, I wouldn't really care, but it's just that having 3 of them be different is a bit concerning, I guess. As you can see, the stock metal discs all are dimpled all the way through, so I don't know why they decided not to have them more consistent, but it is what I have now. So on the very last friction plate, you need to go 1 notch over when looking at the assembly instructions. So all the friction plates has gone into that notch that went all the way down. This one, you go to the, instead of sitting there, you go to the next notch over. That sits like that. Now we get our outer hub. Let's give it a light coat of oil. Again, inspect it if you haven't inspected it. And that looks fine. Just give it a quick wipe down, get my hand marks off of that. Again, make sure that if your washer is sitting here, make sure it goes back on this needle bearing, because that's quite easy to pop off. And once all that is in place, it doesn't really matter which location this one goes into, just put it in, and that sits like that. Now I got these heavy duty clutch springs that comes with the kit for the carbon fiber clutch plates. Just so this is the OEM spring and the aftermarket on the left. They're pretty much the exact same height, which is good, but this one's a lot stiffer because it has a thicker gauge wire that the spring's made from, and you need that higher clamping force for the carbon fiber clutches. So these will go in next, and they just fly. These go into these slots. So the next thing to go on will be the screws. So I'll be first putting them in by hand. So when reinstalling these clutch spring bolts, put some thread lock on it. There was a service bulletin that went out a couple of years ago, which affects all model of B Kings and some models of Gen 2 Hayabusas, where these bolts would loosen up over time and end up hitting your clutch cover over there. So when you go to put these on, just put just a little bit of blue thread lock and just put them down by hand. Now I'm gonna get my 10mm, and what I'm gonna do is just go in a crisscross pattern until they just touch against its seat, and then I'm gonna go in with a torque wrench. That's already seated. Alright, so once this housing is seated, this is torqued to 10 Newton meters. Now again, this is only on the B Kings and the Gen 2 Hayabusas, so just try to find what the torque spec is for your clutch basket, because you don't want to strip these out, because then you got a expensive assembly to replace. So I'm gonna grab my torque wrench, 10mm. It's already set to 10 Newton meters, and I'm gonna just again just go in a crisscross. So starting at the top, and that's it. 10 Newton meters isn't a lot, which is probably why they recommended the thread lock in the service bulletin, so they don't back off, but this is the correct torque for this clutch housing. So just make sure you find the correct torque specs for yours. So now we'll go back to finally putting the clutch housing back on, and we'll button it all up. When it's time to put the clutch cover housing back on, if you put a new gasket, I recommend using this stuff over here, Hylamar. It's just this tacky, greasy sort of thing, and you get a little bit of this, and you run it on this side of the housing, and it helps to kind of just keep this gasket in place. And on this side, which goes up against your engine, you could either use just rub it down with a bit of oil or even grease. And what this does is help it come out like this. So when you go to take this clutch cover off, as you can see, it came out in one piece, no rips, no tears. It's sticking onto this side of the housing. And if you do need to now take this off, most of the gasket materials on this side, and because it's out of the bike, it's easier to work on and scrape the gasket off if you need to replace it. But this still looks good, so I'm going to reinstall this back in the engine. And you have these little dowels over here to help you locate. So what I like to do is just line up the dowels and just put it in. It pops in. It should pop in quite freely by hand. And now I'll go and install the stainless bolts all the way around. So these outer bolts also get torqued down to 10 Newton meters. These are 8mm bolts. I just snug them down by hand, and now I'm going to go through with the torque wrench, and again in the crisscross pattern, and get it down to 10 Newton meters. So I'm not going straight away to 10 Newton meters, I'm kind of snugging it up first. This is just to make sure we have even pressure all the way around when I go to actually get it to 10 Newton meters. So what you want is you could, if your torque wrench goes low enough, is to actually set it to something like 5 or 6 Newton meters, and then go for a second round where you torque it all the way up to 10 Newton meters. And back up to the top. Alright, so that's all been done. So now I'm gonna end up replacing my engine oil and filter, and it's important to just be gentle with the clutch and let it just kind of wear in. So I'll just be riding this bike around before I take it back out to the drag strip. But other than that, as you can see, it was quite easy to do, and most bikes are similar, and it's, you know, you don't need to spend so much money at the dealership to get it replaced. Now that this is done, if you have a cable clutch, you might want to adjust the cable, because this is a hydraulic clutch. Don't have to mess around with that. But yeah, that's pretty much it.